So the types of information you want to track at a process level is, of course, what the process name is, and that might be a functional name, but ideally you would also be able to track if you actually have an Informatica process called ABC123 that, and it's important to know that ID so that you can find it in your Informatica tool, then you probably want that too. But you might want to also a user-facing name that, oh, ABC123 is the applicant export or something. Now, what type is this? Oh, it's an Informatica export, right? What's the tool? Oh, the tool is Informatica, right? So that's that kind of choice. But again, you might have something that's an API that's that's and the tool is a Swagger JSON definition or something. What area or domain it's in, if that's getting a little curated information, it can be really helpful. What the source system is, and that could be a protocol system, meaning that I'm saying that it's coming from a flat file or from a API schema, and what the target system is, and so and then what the selection criteria is. If there's some context that this data that's coming out, this is at a process level, that this data is only including data with the status of X, or that's more than that has changed since the last time we ran it, or whatever that kind of thing. Because that's important to understanding this question of why is the data coming or not. The purpose of it, we talked about that. Why does this exist? Oh, this exists to integrate these two data systems that we have. Usability rating, this is something you can decide if you want to use that this is a certified report, or it's a trusted report, or it's an untrusted report, even could be something you say. Or maybe it's a inactive, do not use type of status. Those policy attributes, though, it contains PII, it is requires a data sharing agreement. Whatever your policies are, being able to associate those with these items. And an explicit owner, if there is one, if you track such a thing for this process, maybe that's something that's derived, like in our tool, you would derive that from the functional area and the data and the data system and tools potentially, but you might have an explicit owner as well. Maybe some information about how do I access it, or how do I run it, or how do I get it, or have a link to request it, to request that happens. So of this information here, I think the process name, the tool, the type, the source system, and the target system is a thing that is probably pretty easily pulled from almost any data system from an inventory standpoint. Some of these other things, like, well, what distinct functional area it's in, maybe what the kind of an understanding of the selection criteria at a process level, the purpose, the usability rating, policy attributes, owner. The rest things get to be a little more curated information that might require some human intervention on that. Additionally, now you might have some request information that you're tracking, particularly if you're doing this from a new report, like, well, who requested it? What's its current status? Is it has it been developed yet? Is it complete, or has it been curated yet? Is it complete? Tracking that. The version and status of this. So, oh, this report has been changed 3 times, and here's the history of that change, and this most recent version is complete, and this is why. It can be helpful. Processing frequency. How often does this run? Is it something that's run on demand? Is it something that's run daily? And that might be difficult to track. So rather than maybe tracking that in the system, you might sort of point to, as part of this, maybe point to where that's discoverable, because maybe that changes on a regular basis. But how the processing frequency is set. Oh, this is set by whatever. So if you can't actually track the frequency and keep that synchronized, at least show how that's getting set. Sometimes it is important to understand what other related processes is. So let's say that this is an ETL process that runs on this admissions data, or let's say it's a application data that's getting loaded for a student, a prospect, or an applicant essentially, and you have one data feed that loads all the demographic information, and then another data feed that loads the application. Well, it's important to know that the application process is related to and happens in sequence after the demographic process. And if the demographic process fails, you can have the application process fail. So understanding that kind of relation and sequencing and dependency is important too. We in our tool, we have this concept of a collection, And a collection is essentially a document, or various types of documents that you can do to bring together multiple specifications. Like, here are these 5 different data flow processes and the sequence with which you run, and put any sort of context or information around that, or diagram. Maybe you really want the actual processing code, like if it's a query or an extract, or there's other kind of native programming language around this that you can import in as sort of code text, or link over to either the code in the Git repository or something, or the actual code in the tool. This, in some cases, is super important to do if you're trying to inventory this and later curate it, because the inventory process might only get the name, the type, the tool, the source, and the target. And in order to derive the rest of it, you're going to want to look at the code. And if you can bring in the code, that's great. If not, having the tool say, hey, this is where you can find the code, so that someone who's going in to curate this can then link over and find that. Lastly, and kind of maybe critically, but not required, is the actual mappings and lineage. So even if you don't track the individual entities or objects, relationship and transformations that are happening there, you're getting an immense value out of understanding either at an inventory level or a curation level, or both, what these processes are, where they exist, how do I find them, what do they do there, and even if you don't have that lineage piece. So this is why I'm saying that, like, a lot of people come to us with our tool and say, hey, we want to track lineage. And when it really gets down to it, they don't need to do lineage yet, or even at all. Like, they really just need to understand what processes exist. And maybe at the minimum, the lineage you're trying to track is system-to-system lineage, which you capture here.